Starting in 1893, newspapers began reporting a remarkable and macabre story, which detailed an incredible offer for anyone brave enough to endure its challenge. The articles reported that 5 years earlier, Baroness Elizabeth Demidov, a Russian aristocrat, had died and was buried in an ornate tomb in Paris's Père Lachaise cemetery. Her will, it was said, had a mysterious and disturbing stipulation. It said that the Baroness's fortune would be inherited by anyone who could live alone in her tomb for a full year. The Baroness's estate was often said to be either $1 million or 5 million francs, a healthy fortune today and an astronomical sum in 1893. The newspaper articles went on to describe the conditions of the deal. The potential claimant would have no contact with the outside world. Their food would be brought to them by a bucket, and any waste would be removed the same way. They could not converse with the person who brought them their food. They could read books or newspapers, but could have no other distraction. They were allowed to leave the tomb for 1 hour each day to walk the cemetery, but so as to ensure that they didn't meet or speak with anyone else, it would have to be after the cemetery gates closed for the night and before the sun rose and they opened in the morning. 5 o'clock in the winter and 8 o'clock in the summer is often what was specified. Most importantly, the body of Baroness Demidoff herself was said to be lying in the center of the tomb, inside a glass coffin, apparently perfectly preserved. Some articles had the gruesome extra detail that the entire tomb, the walls and ceilings, were covered in mirrors so that the corpse of the Baroness would be visible to the occupant at all times. If any rule was broken by the would-be claimant during their time inside, the deal was off, and they would be forced to leave. Several people had apparently already tried, with most only lasting a day or two, and some going a couple of weeks at most. One man, it was said, had completely lost his reason and still remains a jabbering idiot. The article then went on to note that since foreigners did not seem exempt from attempting, there is every chance, therefore, for a strong-minded American who fears neither ghosts, ghouls, nor gravestones to become rich in the short period of 365 days. Application is to be made to the municipality of Paris. The story quickly spread and versions of it appeared in papers throughout the world. The French government was apparently inundated with letters from all across the globe, with people stating that they would take up the offer and would come to Paris to attempt to inherit the Baroness's fortune. Widows wrote to say they were looking to support themselves or sick friends, seeking to donate the fortune to a charity or to build an orphanage. More than one person wrote into the Chicago Herald offering to split the money with the paper if their travel expenses could be covered, or if they could send written correspondences from the tomb on a regular basis. A young girl from a large, poor family offered to take $100,000 of the money and said the paper could keep the remainder. Several people said they were willing to take on the challenge if the paper could provide for their family during their year-long absence, so they could be assured that they were looked after before bringing the inheritance home. Many wrote in to request further details or inquiring whether or not the story was a hoax. Hundreds of letters were sent to French ambassadors, the mayor of Paris, and the caretaker of Père Lachaise cemetery, asking for details and volunteering to undertake the year-long solitary residence in the tomb. The ambassador in France and city officials in Paris reportedly had to hire extra clerks just to handle the influx of letters from North America inquiring about the tomb. The exact origins of the story are muddy, but it's often traced to a Chicago newspaper, though it could have been circulating in Europe for some time before. The conservator of Père Lachaise Cemetery himself was said to have worked extensively to find out who originated this story when the articles first appeared, but he was unsuccessful. Follow-up articles denouncing the story as a hoax started appearing quickly, just weeks after the first reports in 1893, and these notices would themselves be reprinted periodically over the years. But the story had seeped into the public consciousness, and belief in the million-dollar fortune that could be earned by spending a year in the tomb held firm. People continued to come forward in order to meet the challenge as late as the 1930s. In 1932, the Emporia Gazette reported that an ex-soldier had arrived at the cemetery announcing his intention to win the million-dollar inheritance. This apparently started another mini-episode of adventure seekers coming and inquiring about opportunities to spend a year in the tomb. The Baroness was indeed a real person. Born Elizaveta Alexandrovna Stroganov on February 5, 1779, to a wealthy, noble family, her first name is often anglicized to Elizabeth in writings about her. She married Nicholas Demidov at age 16. The couple would have 4 children, including 2 sons who lived to adulthood. Elizabeth would be a witness to a great deal of history. The couple moved to France and would see the rise of Napoleon, after which they moved back to Russia, following the sweeping changes and upheavals of the period from one end of the continent to the other. Elizabeth was described as bright, sociable, and cheerful. The couple would eventually separate, and Elizabeth would move back to France, where she died in Paris on April 8, 1818, at the age of 39. She was entombed in her now famous, imposing final resting place in Père Lachaise Cemetery. While the claims of the story aren't true, there's still lingering mystery and uncertainty around how it started. Why it centered around Elizabeth Demidov isn't clear. There are many articles that don't use her name at all and simply refer to her as a Russian princess buried in Père Lachaise. Details contained in the articles associated with this story often changed depending on the printing. Her title was sometimes Countess or Princess. The prize money was said to be $1 million or 1 million francs or 5 million francs. One of the most glaring errors is that Demidov had not died 5 years prior, but had in fact been dead for over 7 decades by the time the story first appeared in papers, and she had 2 adult sons whom likely would have inherited her money. Maybe it was the fact that she was a woman regarded for her beauty during her life, who died young, was of Eastern European origin, and was buried in a Gothically decorated tomb, which fit the vampiric image that some of the articles leaned heavily into. Some write-ups took a supernatural angle and put forward the idea that no one would be able to complete the challenge because the perfectly preserved corpse of Demidov was slowly sucking the life and energy out of the person in the tomb with her, and they would eventually die. Regardless, her large, exquisitely decorated tomb became the source of one of the 19th century's greatest newspaper hoaxes. As far as can be told, no one has ever been inside the tomb, and it has remained sealed since the day Elizabeth Demidov was interred there over 200 years ago.